Welcome back to the C Files. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. In this video, we're going to return to The Battle for Christmas by Stefan Nessenbaum, the book. And I'm going to read for 30 minutes and then we're going to shut it down. But I'm on page 16, and we begin in this page with The Miser and the Sots, a Salem village wassail. And we'll move on from there. All right, so we're going to continue this book all the way till the Christmas season is done. So we could spend some time learning a little bit about Christmas in America. Okay, let's get started and have fun with this. The single incident of Christmas keeping in 17th century Massachusetts that can be described in any detail took place in 1679. And it is wonderfully revealing of the persistence of English seasonal folkways on the margins of Puritan New England. At about 9 p.m. on Christmas night, 1679, four young men from Salem Village invaded the house of 72-year-old John Roden, who lived with his wife, Mary, and their apprentice and adopted son, Daniel Poole. John Roden was a farmer who owned an orchard that apparently included pear trees, from the fruit of which he and his wife had prepared a stock of pear wine, commonly known as perry. Now, in the testimony he gave 3 months later, old John Roden provided a detailed account of what happened that night. First, the four men entered his house and sat down by the fire, and two of them began to sing. When they had completed two songs, one of the men asked John Roden, "How do you like this, father? Is this not worth a cup of perry?" Roden answered them, "Well, I do not like it so well. Pray be gone." But the men would not leave, telling Roden it was Christmas Day at night, and they came to be merry and to drink perry, which was not to be had anywhere else but here. And perry they would have before they went. So Christmas Day night, they wanted perry. Roden again refused to offer them perry and told them they should have none there. The four visitors still would not take no for an answer. This time they tried to cajole Roden into offering them the perry by promising payment at a later time. "Call for your pot of perry and mine, and I will pay you again," said one. This time it was Roden's wife who replied, saying, "We keep no ordinary tavern to call for pots." A pot commonly referred to alcohol, as in the still current usage, potted. So the four men left, or so it seemed. For 15 minutes later, three of them returned, saying they had managed to borrow some money and could pay for the perry on the spot. Apparently, the Rodens would actually have sold them the drink at this point, but the couple demanded to see the money in advance. One of the men shoved a coin in Goodwife Roden's face. It proved to be nothing but a piece of lead. Huh? Scammers. Well, well, well. What happens next? At this point, the rodents, assisted by their young apprentice, managed to cajole or push the visitors out the door and into the December night. But once again, the respite was brief. The visitors stopped about 40 feet from the house and began to harass the rodents. They bellowed out sarcastic cries of, "Hello!" One of them, Samuel Braybrook by name, began to taunt the rodent's apprentice, demanding that he give them directions to the town of Marblehead, where alcohol could surely be had, especially on Christmas night. The apprentice, Daniel Poole, replied that he had better be at home with his wife. Braybrook continued to taunt young Poole, asking him if he wanted to fight. If so, come out. Braybrook's companion, Joseph Flint, renewed the dare, this time suggesting that they make a bet out of it. Flint said he, Poole, wanted to box. He would box with him for a pot of Perry. Finally, when it became clear that despite all this bravado, the apprentice could not be pressured into leaving his doorway, the dates and taunts turned into actual violence. Violence that was directed not directly at Poole or the rodents, but at their house. Here is John Roden's account of what happened. They threw stones, bones, and other things at Poole in the doorway and against the house. They beat down much of the daubing in several places and continued to throw stones for an hour and a half with little intermission. They also broke down about a pool and a half of fence, being stone wall and a cellar without outside the house. Distant about 4 or 5 rods was broken through the door, and 5 or 6 pecks of apples were stolen. Quite a scene, but one that is wholly recognizable from the English and European sources, for this was a wassail gone bad. The 4 young men came to the old man's house and sang for their gift of Perry. When refused, they pretended that they were willing to pay for the Perry, even though making the exchange a financial transaction represented a violation of the wassail ritual, in which the drink would have been a gift offered in return for the songs. But the visitors could or would not pay. The coin they brought turned out to be a fake, and their offer of payment seems to have been intended merely as a sarcastic comment on the rodents' refusal to play their expected role in the gift exchange. Finally, the wassail turned into what the French call a charivari. Loud noise, mocking taunts, and stone throwing, which lasted for more than an hour. There was no gift and therefore no goodwill, no treat, but only a trick in turn. Folks, what does that sound like? Sounds like Halloween, doesn't it? Typically, all 4 of the Wasslers were young men. One was 17, another about 21. Only one of the 4 was married. Typically, 2. All of them stood near the low end of the economic hierarchy, and none would ever achieve any great degree of prosperity. Finally, 13 years later, 3 of the 4 men were um, peripherally, excuse me, let me try it again. 3 of the 4 men were peripherally involved in the events surrounding the Salem witch trials of 1692. Hmm. That's interesting because this shows you what kind of men were pulling off those trials, and the Puritans were being blamed for it in modern day. Two of them, Braybrook and Flint, were among the signers of a 1695 petition urging the dismissal of the Reverend Samuel Parris, this Salem village minister who played a central role as a supporter of the trials and an accuser of the witches. Well, Mr. Reverend, well, you have no idea what you did to the church as far as historical terms go, but you know, that's how it goes sometimes. And a third, Benjamin Fuller, was one of 36 Salem village residents who refused to pay their taxes in support of Samuel Parris's ministerial salary when Parris first arrived amid controversy in Salem village in 1689. The Salem Wrestle, as I have come to call it, surely represented no threat to the social or cultural fabric of Massachusetts. Just as more frequent but similar incidents in Europe of misrule and charivari were hardly revolutionary acts. This was a trivial event, and the only harm it did was to the family of one elderly man, possibly a stingy and ill-tempered individual. Still, the episode suggests something of the animosities engendered by the cultural fault lines that continue to divide official Massachusetts culture from the lingering traditions it tried so hard, and on the whole, with such great success to eradicate. Okay, next, we'll read about a window on popular culture, the Dominion of New England. Once, for a few strange years, the curtain of Puritan suppression was lifted, but not by choice. By 1680, it was becoming clear that the Restoration government in London would not continue to tolerate the Puritan political culture that had been established in New England. Knowing that its official charter of incorporation might be abrogated, in 1681, the Massachusetts General Court reluctantly revoked several of the colony's laws that were most obnoxious to the English authorities. One of the laws thus revoked was the act banning the celebration of Christmas. But this was not enough to save the charter. It was abrogated in 1684, and during the 3 years from 1687 through 1689, Massachusetts was governed directly from London as part of a short-lived entity known as the Dominion of New England. What happened during these 3 years was deeply humiliating to the Puritans. The hated governor of the Dominion, Sir Edward Andros, ruled most of New England, along with New York. From his headquarters in Boston, Governor Andros attempted to impose English law and custom on the very seat of Puritan power. On Christmas Day, 1686, for example, two religious services were performed at the Boston Town House, and Andros attended both of them with a red coat soldier going on his right hand and Captain George on the left. But Governor Andros did not simply impose Anglican practices on a populace that was universally resistant to them. One effect of his rule was to permit the public expression of a set of seasonal practices that were associated with the popular culture of 17th century England. These expressions of the popular culture could not have surfaced openly without the legal protection offered by the Andros regime. Under its protective mantle, during this brief period, it was possible for the first time in Massachusetts to act out heterodox rituals in public. A few Bostonians celebrated Shrove Tuesday, Mardi Gras, by dancing in the streets, and a maypole was erected in Charleston. Christmas keeping apparently began even in advance of the Andros regime. On December 25th, 1685, the magistrate Samuel Sowell noted that, quote, some somehow observed the day. But he added, as if to reassure himself, that the body of the people profane it, and blessed be God, no authority yet to compel them to keep it. Sowell also offered himself the reassurance that there was less Christmas keeping this year than last year, fewer shops shut up. But that reassurance implicitly ceded the point that in 1684, an even greater number of persons had observed Christmas. A year later, on December 25th, 1686, Sowell once again noted, shops open today generally, and persons about their occasions. Again, the key word here may have been generally, because Sowell went on to acknowledge some but few carts were at town with wood. Christmas keeping even entered into print culture during the Andros regime. The most dramatic example was an almanac written by a resident of Saybrook, Connecticut, named John Tolley and published in Boston during each of the 3 years of Dominion government, 1687 to 1689. We have already seen that the Puritans purged New England's almanacs of all reference to Christmas, and the various saints' days of the English church calendar. But Tolley boldly labored December 25 in capital letters as Christmas Day. And he also added every one of the red letter days recognized by the Church of England. December 21 thereby became St. Thomas. December 26 was St. Stephen, and December 27 was Innocents. In all likelihood, Tolley used capital letters simply because his Boston printer did not have any red ink. The following year, Tooley's Almanac was published with the official imprimatur of Andros's deputy, Edwin Randolph, on the title page. That same year, Tooley made an even more dramatic gesture to signify his incorporation of English popular culture. At the end of his 1688 almanac, Tooley added a series of monthly prognostications, all of them satirical, and most of them baldy and scatological. For example, he concluded his prognostication for the month of March by announcing that if it failed to come true, the reader should light tobacco or make bonfire with our observations. In other words, use the pages of his almanac to wipe their when going to the bathroom. For February, Tooley wrote, the nights are still cold and long, which may cause great conjunction betwixt the male and female planets of our sublunary orb, the effects whereof may be seen about 9 months after, and portend great changes of midwife, nurse, and naming the bantling. Well, well. Tully's prognostication for December was a verse that opened by referring to the festering that would take place during the Christmas season. This month, the cooks do very early rise to roast their meat and make their Christmas pies. And it went on to associate this feasting with the social inversion of rich and poor. Poor men at rich men's tables, their guts forage with roast beef, mince pies, pudding, and plum porridge. In prose, Tully added, "This month money and rum will be in great request, and he that hath the first shall not need fear wanting the latter." The overthrow of the Dominion of New England in 1689 put a stop to this flurry of popular culture, and it ushered in 2 decades in which there is little in the public record about Christmas. That changed in 1711, when the Reverend Cotton Mather of Boston recorded some disturbing news in his diary for December 30. "I hear of a number of young people of both sexes belonging, many of them, to my flock, who have had on the Christmas night this last week a frolic, a reveling feast, and ball, i.e., dance." The very next year, Mather denounced the holiday in a sermon, published immediately after its delivery under the title Grace Defended. The biblical text on which he based his sermon, drawn from the Epistle of Jude, showed what was on Mather's mind. The text he chose was an attack on certain early Christians who had deceitfully crept into the early Christian church using religion as a cover for sexual license, giving themselves over to fornication, ungodly men turning the grace of our God into lasciviousness. Mather substituted the word wantonness. Mather returned to the same topic in 1713 in a treatise, titled Advice from the Watchtower. This new treatise cut a broader swath than Grace defended. It dealt with a whole battery of practices that were threatening to subvert New England culture from within. The treatise ended by presenting a black list of some evil customs which begin to appear among us, along with Christmas and gambling with cards and dice. Mather's blacklist included partying on Sunday evenings and even during the intermission between the two Sabbath day sermons, running horse races on such solemn occasions as funerals, training days, and public lectures, turning weddings into drunken revels, and holding corn huskings that were little more than excuses for riot. There was a pattern here. All these practices involved young people who were appropriating serious social occasions as opportunities for bouts of drinking and sex. And y'all only thought that only happened in our day, huh? In his section on corn huskings, Mather warned young people, "Late the night of your pleasure be turned into fear." It was in just such context, positioned between the drinking of toast and riots at corn huskings, that Mather placed the subject of Christmas. "Christmas revels begin to be taken up," he reported, Among some vainer young people, here and there in some of our towns, it was bad enough. Mather argued that Christmas was not divinely ordained, but what was offensive about it, most of all, was that it was being abused, just as the weddings and the corn huskings were abused. An occasion on which, as Mather put it, abominable things were done. Clearly, those abominations had mostly to do with sex. Christmas back then wasn't what Christmas is today, folks. Mather's charges are confirmed by demographic data. Social historians have discovered that the rate of premarital pregnancies in New England began to climb early in the 18th century, and that by mid-century it had skyrocketed. Maybe that's why babies are born in July and June. Mather's charges are confirmed by demographic data. Social historians have discovered that the rate of premarital pregnancies in New England began to climb early in the 18th century, and that by mid-century it had skyrocketed. In some New England towns, almost half the first children were born less than 7 months after their parents' marriage. What makes the demographic data especially interesting is that this sexual activity had a seasonal pattern to it. There was a bulge in the number of births in the months of September and October, meaning that sexual activity peaked during the Christmas season. When we come to the next reading, it will be Misrule in New England Almanacs. I hope you're enjoying this book and these readings about Christmas. And hope everyone enjoys their Christmas season. And whatever you do, no revelings during Christmas. It's about the birth of Christ. Remember what the purpose of it is. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on the C Files.